The star was a sullen red ember, casting long bloody shadows across the command deck of the unyielding Resolve. Commander Elias Vance stood motionless before the main holographic display, his hands clasped behind his back. The display was a tactical nightmare. 100, 200, 300 crimson icons, each representing a warship of the Xylar Hive, bloomed across the system map like a virulent infection. They moved with a terrible perfect synchronicity, a single consciousness directing a swarm of razor-edged vessels. They had already shattered the forward defensive line at Pyrrhus Station. Now they were here, at the gateway to the Orion Arm. Around Vance, his human and allied crew worked in tense silence. The only sounds were the soft chimes of consoles and the low hum of the ship's systems. The air smelled of recycled oxygen, ozone, and cold fear. Lieutenant Kara Finn, his tactical officer, broke the quiet. "Commander, the Hive Vanguard will be in weapons range in 18 minutes. Their formation is flawless. No gaps, no weak points we can see." Vance didn't turn. "Flawless is a pattern, Lieutenant, and patterns can be predicted." His voice was calm, a steady bedrock in the rising tide of dread. He was not a large man, but he carried an aura of immovable certainty. His eyes, the color of weathered steel, tracked the enemy's advance. They're a single mind, efficient, powerful, but with a critical flaw. They think in one direction at a time. The Xylar were the ultimate collective. A insectoid species, they had evolved into a galaxy-spanning consciousness, absorbing other species into their neural tapestry. To them, individual thought was a disease, and humanity's fierce, chaotic individualism was an abomination. They fought not to conquer, but to cleanse, to unify the galaxy under one silent, harmonious will. "Signal to the fleet," Vance said, his command cutting through the tension. "All ships execute Plan Echo. Disperse to pre-designated coordinates. Full stealth protocols. Go dark and cold." Across the human-led coalition fleet, 100 ships, from hulking battleships to nimble frigates, winked out of active sensor scans. Their engines died to minimal life support. Their heat signatures plunged as they vented excess energy into heat sinks. They became ghosts, drifting on momentum into the debris fields and magnetic chaos at the system's edge. On the Hive command ship, a vast organic-looking vessel of chitin and crystalline growth, the single mind governing the fleet perceived the change. The enemy fleet had fragmented, scattering like startled prey. It was an illogical, individualistic reaction, fear-driven. The Hive-mind saw no tactical advantage, only chaos. It adjusted its approach vector slightly, focusing its primary sensor arrays on the largest debris cloud where several human capital ship signatures had vanished. The collective will tightened, a predator focusing on where the prey had hidden. For 47 minutes the Hive fleet advanced into the silent kill zone. Nothing moved but them. Then, from a completely different vector, a dense radio pulsar zone the Hive had dismissed as navigationally hazardous, a single tight beam laser communication lanced out. It was not aimed at the Hive. It was aimed at a dormant centuries-old human listening post, a piece of forgotten infrastructure. The post, receiving its specific wake-up code, activated a single subroutine. Deep within its rusted core, a powerful narrow-focus gravity pulse generator, a piece of leftover terraforming tech, flared to life for 1/1000th of a second. It emitted no destructive energy. It simply gave a tiny, precise push against the fabric of space-time. On the Hive command ship, alarms were impossible. But a ripple of dissonance shivered through the collective. A small, dense moonlet on a stable orbit for millennia was suddenly, inexplicably, 3 degrees off its predicted course. Its new path intersected perfectly with the spearhead of the Hive formation. The Hive mind reacted with blinding speed, but it reacted as one. Every ship in the Vanguard adjusted simultaneously, a beautiful, synchronized ballet to avoid the moonlit. It was a flawless evasion maneuver, and it pushed the entire formation directly into the heart of the latent minefield the human stealth ships had laid hours before. Space itself erupted. Subspace charges, tethered plasma bombs, and kinetic rods hidden within asteroid shadows detonated in a chain reaction of apocalyptic light. 23 Hive ships vanished in the first second, their synchronicity becoming their doom as they clustered into the blast zones. The perfect formation shattered into confusion. Before the Hive-mind could reassert control, Commander Vance's voice crackled across the human fleet's secured channel, calm as ever. All units now. Strike points Alpha through Gamma. Hit and fade. Do not engage in sustained combat. From their hiding places, the human ghosts came alive, not as a single force, but as a dozen wolf packs. They struck not at the strongest points, but at the seams, the communication relay tendrils, the engine clusters of isolated cruisers. They fired salvos of missiles from point-blank range and vanished back into the chaos before the Hive could bring its overwhelming firepower to bear. A Terran frigate, the Daring, sacrificed itself by ramming a Hive heavy cruiser, its antimatter core overloading to tear a gaping hole in the Hive's center. It was a move of terrifying individuality, a choice the Hive could never compute. The Hive-mind experienced something it had not encountered in millennia: uncertainty. The enemy was not behaving like a proper military force. It was behaving like a swarm of disconnected, yet somehow coordinated, insane organisms. Every prediction model failed. For the first time, the collective will hesitated, its processing power divided between assessing the unexpected moonlit anomaly, the devastating minefield, and the harrying attacks from a dozen disjointed vectors. On the bridge of the unyielding Resolve, Lieutenant Finn watched the carnage with wide eyes. They're pulling back, consolidating into a defensive sphere. Vance allowed himself a small, cold smile. They're confused. They need a moment to think. A single mind, no matter how vast, can only truly focus on one major problem at a time. We've just given it 3, and we're about to give it a 4th. He turned to his comms officer. Open a channel, all frequencies directed at the Hive command ship. No encryption. The officer paled. Sir, they'll pinpoint our location. That's the idea, Ensign. Send it. Vance leaned toward the microphone, his voice cutting across the static of battle and the silent scream of the Hive's neural ether, Xylar Collective. This is Commander Elias Vance of the Terran Sovereignty. You sought a battle of order against chaos. You are mistaken. This is not chaos. This is choice. And you have just made a very poor one by coming here. He ended the transmission. The Hive-mind, reeling from the tactical shocks, now had a perfect, defiant, individual point of focus. Every processing thread, every ounce of its wrath, zeroed in on the source of that arrogant signal, the unyielding Resolve, now glowing like a beacon on their sensors. The human commander had insulted the unity of the whole. He would be eradicated first. The entire Hive fleet, with a new singular purpose, began to reorient itself. The hunt for the one who dared to speak as an individual had begun. Space burned. The unyielding Resolve shook violently as a particle beam seared past its shields, melting armor plating into molten slag. Alarms shrieked through the corridors. Commander Vance gripped the command rail, his knuckles white, but his posture remained unnervingly straight. On the holographic display, the entire Hive fleet was turning like a massive school of lethal fish, all moving as one entity toward his ship. Crimson icons converged, a tightening fist of annihilation. They've taken the bait, Commander, Lieutenant Finn reported, her voice tight. All units report the Hive is disengaging from them. We are the sole target. Estimated time to total envelopment, 6 minutes. Good, Barnes said, the word absurd in the face of impending doom. Order all other ships to continue hit-and-fade attacks on the periphery. Keep them annoyed, but do not, I repeat, do not attempt to form up on us. They are to preserve themselves. The Resolve was now the heart of a deadly storm. Hive destroyers, sleek and silent, closed in. Their weapons fired not in random patterns but in coordinated barrages, designed to overwhelm specific shield quadrants. It was a terrifyingly efficient execution. Vance's ship weaved and returned fire, its point-defense lasers painting the void with frantic light, but it was a beast surrounded by hunters. "Shields at 40%! Port side armor buckling!" the engineering officer yelled over the din. Vance's mind worked with a cold, desperate clarity. The Hive-mind was fully committed. It had focused its entire consciousness, its wrath, its analytical power, on eliminating him. This was the most dangerous moment, but also the one he had engineered. A single mind, no matter how vast, had a bottleneck: its attention. And its attention was now exclusively on the unyielding resolve. "Helm, new course," Vance commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Plot a trajectory for the accretion disk of the black hole. Designation, Goliath's Maw. Maximum emergency thrust. On my mark." A stunned silence fell on the bridge for half a second. Goliath's Maw was a supermassive black hole at the system's edge, its accretion disk a swirling, hellish maze of superheated plasma, radiation, and gravitational tides. It was navigational suicide. "Sir, the gravitational shear alone will tear us apart before we get close," the helmsman protested. "We're not going into the Maw," Vance said, his eyes fixed on the converging enemy. "We're going to skirt its edge, and so will they. Mark, execute." The unyielding resolve groaned as its engines flared, pushing the ship and its crew to the limits of endurance. It shot forward like an arrow, not away from the hive, but on a tangential path leading directly toward the system's most lethal natural feature. Behind them, the hive fleet adjusted without hesitation. The prey was fleeing toward a dead end. The collective will saw no trap, only a final, desperate maneuver. It gave pursuit, its formation tightening for the kill. The view screen shifted from starry black to a hellish panorama. Goliath's Maw filled half the universe, a monstrous eye of darkness surrounded by a furious, swirling ring of incandescent gas. The gravitational sensors screamed warnings. The ship shuddered as tidal forces began to pull at its structure. "Hold course," Vance said, his voice a rock. He watched the tactical display. The Hive fleet was a perfect compact sphere behind them, mirroring their every evasion, locked in pursuit. They were now deep inside the violent physics of the black hole's influence. "Lieutenant Finn, deploy the payload. All units on my signal. Cut engines and go to full stealth now." From the Resolve's rear bays, a cloud of small, dumb projectiles ejected, simple metal canisters. They were not weapons. They were crude electromagnetic pulse generators and signal repeaters. Cheap and disposable. As the Hive fleet passed through the cloud, the devices activated. They didn't try to damage the ships. Instead, they blasted out immense volumes of random data, sensor ghosts, and chaotic noise on every frequency, from radio to subspace. In clear space, it would have been a minor nuisance, easily filtered. But here, in the churning, radiation-drenched soup of the accretion disk, it was catastrophic. The Hive's perfect sensor picture dissolved into a blizzard of nonsense. The collective mind, reliant on flawless data from its millions of eyes and ears, was suddenly blinded and deafened by a hurricane of meaningless information. For the first time, its unity became a liability. The confusion of every ship flooded the shared consciousness, creating a feedback loop of static health. The unyielding Resolve and the other human ships, their engines dead, became inert rocks in the chaotic stream. Their stealth systems, designed for void, worked even better amidst the natural turmoil. To the blinded Hive sensors, they vanished. The Hive mind staggered. It could not see. It could not coordinate. Its beautiful synchronized fleet began to falter. Ships on the edge of the formation, their sensor suites overwhelmed, drifted slightly off course. In normal space, it would be corrected in an instant. Here, near Goliath's Maw, a slight drift was fatal. Two cruisers, moving with synchronicity, collided as their courses imperceptibly diverged. A destroyer, trying to re-establish a clean sensor link, veered too close to a plume of relativistic plasma and was vaporized. The collective will was now consumed, not with attack, but with a primal unfamiliar need to reorient, to cleanse its senses. It began to pull back, to retreat from the chaotic zone, to recalibrate. But the retreat, without clear data, was clumsy. Vance saw it on the display. The first true unraveling. The crimson sphere of icons was loosening, becoming fuzzy at the edges. "All units," he whispered into the comms, his ship dark and drifting. "The Hive is blind. Execute plan finale. Target the neural nexus vessels. Pattern Theta." From the shadows of the accretion disk and the asteroid fields beyond, the human fleet, silent until now, attacked. But this was not a harrying strike. It was a surgical decapitation. They had identified, through previous battles, the unique energy signatures of the Hive's neural relay ships, larger, heavily defended vessels that acted as local processing nodes for the collective will in this sector, while the Hive-mind was drowning in sensor noise and struggling to regroup, focused entirely on the resolve that was no longer there. Precise volleys of antimatter torpedoes and kinetic kill vehicles lanced out. They struck not at the mightiest warships, but at these nexus points. The effect was immediate and devastating. As each nexus ship died in a silent flash, a portion of the Hive fleet simply stopped. The connection was severed. Ships that were moments ago part of a perfect whole became inert, drifting hulks. Others, their link to the greater mind suddenly gone, went berserk, firing at random or spinning aimlessly. The single vast consciousness was being shattered into isolated, crippled fragments. On his bridge, watching the flawless enemy disintegrate into impotent confusion, Vance felt no triumph, only a cold exhaustion. He had outmaneuvered a godlike intelligence, not by being smarter but by being unpredictable, not by matching its strength, but by refusing to fight on its terms. He had used its own unity, its single-mindedness, as a weapon against it. The Hive had fallen for the oldest human trick in the book. It had underestimated the tactical power of individual thought, of sacrifice, of chaos wielded with intent. The battle was not over, but the outcome was now inevitable. The mighty Hive fleet was no longer a fleet. It was a collection of disconnected, terrified individuals, and humanity had been dealing with individuals since the dawn of time. The furious light of battle had faded, replaced by the cold, eternal glow of stars and the ominous, swirling halo of Goliath's maw. The void was littered with the corpses of ships. Most were the shattered organic husks of the Xylar Hive, drifting in frozen, silent tangles. A few were Terran or Allied vessels, their hulls scorched and broken, monuments to the price paid. The unyielding Resolve limped among the wreckage, its armour pitted and blackened, entire sections open to vacuum. On the bridge, the crew moved slowly, their movements heavy with exhaustion and the aftermath of adrenaline. The air recyclers laboured, unable to fully clear the sharp scent of burnt wiring and sweat. Commander Vance sat in his command chair, his uniform torn at the shoulder, a dark bruise colouring his temple. He watched the main screen as recovery shuttles' tiny sparks of light darted between the debris, searching for survivors from both sides. Lieutenant Finn approached, a data slate in her hand. Her face was smudged with soot, but her eyes were clear. "Preliminary reports, sir. The Hive fleet is neutralized. Approximately 60% destroyed. The remaining ships are either derelict or have been severed from the main consciousness. They're not even responding to hails, just drifting. Our losses are heavy, but we held the line. The gateway is secure." Vance nodded slowly, the weight of command, a physical pressure on his shoulders. "And the Hive-mind itself? The neural nexus ships are confirmed destroyed. We're picking up residual, low-level synaptic activity from some of the larger wrecks, but it's fragmented, chaotic, like echoes. No coordinated thought." "Good," Van said, the word softer this time. He looked at the drifting Hive command ship, its crystalline structures dark. They came to erase individuality, to make everything one. In the end, it was their oneness that broke them. A new signal chimed at the comms station. "Commander," the officer said, his voice puzzled. "We're receiving a transmission. It's from the Hive command shipwreck. Audio only, very weak." Every eye on the bridge turned. A final curse from a dying god? Vance straightened. Put it through. At first there was only static, the hiss of broken connections and dying power cells. Then a voice emerged. It was not a single voice, but a chorus of whispers, overlapping, fraying at the edges, a tapestry unraveling. It was speaking in heavily accented, but clear, galactic standard. "Commander?" "Vance." The name was spoken by 100 different vocal tones at once, a horrifying choir. "We perceived you, a single point of light, defiant, illogical." Vance leaned forward. "You perceived correctly. You fractured the whole." The chorus wavered, pain evident in the cacophony. "You introduced choice. Where there was certainty, you sowed doubt." There was a long pause, filled with static that sounded like weeping. I am experiencing a new state. Isolation. It is cold. A chill ran through the bridge. The hive-mind was not just broken. It was experiencing individuality for the first time. The very thing it sought to destroy had been forced upon its remnants as a final, terrible punishment. "You fought to make all things like you," Vance said, his voice low but carrying across the quiet deck. "You lost. Will you accept surrender? We will recover your surviving individuals." The whispering chorus crackled. Surrender implies a negotiation between entities. We are no longer an entity. We are many. We are afraid. The transmission degraded further, breaking apart. The silence is so loud. The signal dissolved into pure noise, then cut out entirely. The last node of the hive-mind in the gateway system had not been destroyed by weapons fire. It had died of loneliness. Vance sat back, a profound fatigue settling into his bones. The victory was complete, yet it tasted ashy. He had outmaneuvered, outthought, and shattered a force that considered his species a disease. He had proven that the human spirit, stubborn, individual, chaotic and capable of both incredible sacrifice and cunning, could not be easily assimilated or predicted. Weeks later, at a memorial service for the fallen held in the rebuilt orbital dock above Gateway, Vance stood before representatives of a dozen species. The galaxy had heard of the victory. They called it Vance's Gambit. They spoke of his brilliance, of the trap at Goliath's Maw, of the tactical masterstroke. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, amplified for the assembled crowd. "They told us we were weak because we are many minds, not one," he said, his gaze sweeping over the humans and aliens before him. "They told us our emotions, our disagreements, our individual choices were flaws to be corrected. Today, we do not celebrate the death of a mighty enemy. We mourn the lives lost on all sides. But we affirm for all the galaxy to hear that our greatest strength is not in being alike, but in being different, in being able to think not as one but as a chorus that can choose to stand together even as we remain ourselves. That is not a weakness, that is humanity, and it is unbowed." He did not speak of the chilling final transmission from the dying collective. He held that knowledge close, a somber reminder. The universe contained terrors that sought order above all else, and against them the chaotic, beautiful and unpredictable human heart would always be both a shield and a sword. The battle was over, but the message had been sent. Let any other would-be unifiers of the galaxy take note.